everyone! Welcome back to class. Today we're going to be watching a video. It's 10 minutes long. And there are two people that are going to be talking. Actually, there's a guy named Lifting Vegan Logic, who I don't know. I've just seen this video. And he's going to be looking at Sam Harris's podcast. Now, I know Sam Harris, and I like a lot that Sam Harris stands for. But as many of these people, they have not yet been awakened to be vegan, and I'm going to be reviewing this dialogue and see what happens, or whatever, this analysis. So as usual, I have my trusty notepad here, and I've got Sam Harris and Lifting Vegan Logic. And so if I hear Sam say anything good, he's going to get a check mark. If I find out that that the other guy, Lifting Vegan Logic, says something good, he's going to get a check mark. And we'll see who wins. You guys too. Everybody get out your pens and your pads of paper and make your columns like that. Remember, a check is good and an X means not so great. Oh, and don't forget, if you haven't yet subscribed to this channel, that you should subscribe, because we're going to have lots of fun. Press the subscribe button and the bell, and that way anytime there's a new video, you'll know about it. And, it doesn't cost anything, and if you're not happy, you can always unsubscribe. But, hey, hang out with me. We're going to have fun. And don't forget also that cow's milk is for baby cows, in case you don't know yet. I'm just having water. Here we go. You guys ready? 3, 2, 1. Here we go.
In most people's thinking about being good in the world, and this is the side of kind of the consumer-facing side of.
Hey, you know what, guys? I think I started it too. Let's start over.
Say something about the other side of this equation, which tends to get emphasized in most people's thinking about being good in the world, and this is the side of kind of the consumer-facing side of not contributing to the obvious harms in a way that is egregious, or dialing down one's complicity in this unacceptable status quo as much as possible. And so this goes to things like becoming a vegetarian or a vegan.
Hey, what is up, guys? So if you've been following my channel for a while, you know that outside of veganism, I'm a pretty big fan of Sam Harris.
So let's just stop for 1 second, though. So Sam Harris is talking about vegetarianism and veganism. So just the fact that he is thinking about it, let's give him a check mark for that. And of course, this guy starting right away, talking. Well, let's see what he says first.
And he actually had a podcast come out recently, I think it was like 4 or 5 weeks ago, titled Doing Good. And the theme of this podcast was, how can we go about being a good person in the world? What does it mean to do good? And these kinds of things. So
okay, yeah, Sam Harris, another check mark. I like that. Somebody who's thinking about things beyond themselves. So far, so good.
So within the podcast, there were a couple of things that were said that from a vegan perspective can be a little bit triggering to hear, like as a vegan. And they even touched on veganism a little bit in reference to how to be a good person. So I'm going to analyze today just some of the things that were said by Sam, and just to ask the question, why exactly is Sam Harris still not a vegan?
That's disappointing.
Increasingly, I'm looking to use this podcast and the Waking Up app to do more than merely spread what I consider to be good ideas. That's their primary purpose, obviously, but I want to help solve some of the worst problems we face more directly than just talking about them. And I want to do this systematically, really thinking through what it takes to save the most lives, or reduce the worst suffering, or mitigate the most catastrophic risks.
So Sam talks here about how he really wants to, face up to some of the worst problems we have very directly, as opposed to just talking about them, and how we can reduce some of the worst suffering in the world, as well as save the most lives. So Sam Harris is a person who still supports animal agriculture, which is a clear source.
X for Sam. Supporting animal cruelty. No. Animals deserve a Bill of Rights. That's what they deserve, and that's what we should be working towards. This is extremely sad to see. Imagine if these were dogs. It's not okay.
Of some of the worst suffering on this planet. And when it comes to Sam's desire to want to save lives, let's think about what animal agriculture really is. It is a system which involves breeding animals into existence to be exploited and killed. How could somebody who is so concerned with mitigating suffering and reducing the amount of lives that are taken on this planet. Support.
I'm giving this guy, Lifting Vegan Logic is his name, I'm getting a check mark because he's pointing out something that's very important. The hypocrisy that so many people exhibit who are leading YouTubers, leading thinkers and speakers, but who have not made the personal connection yet with the animals and not understood that it is their responsibility. I'll sit there and just say, you know, it would be nice if we had a vegan world, but I just like the taste of bacon too much. Like, seriously, that's so disappointing. It's the same thing with Jordan Peterson. There's a lot of these guys who have a lot of good things to say, but in reality, it's meaningless if you look at their own lives, and they are hypocrites. Now, this guy here, I don't know what his actual name is, calls himself Lifting Vegan Logic, and he has 600, I'm sorry, my eyesight isn't that good, but over 4,000 subscribers. And you can see he's pretty muscular. I think when he talks about lifting vegan logic, I think he's also a bodybuilder. So I'm not saying that that's necessarily a good thing to be a bodybuilder. I can talk about that in another video. Sometimes I think that bodybuilders spend too much time building muscle that they never will use. Like, it's just sitting there. It's like, I can understand if you're going to build muscle because you want to, you need to, I don't know, run into a burning building, like firefighters, police officers or something. Or let's say you're somebody who moves pianos all day and you need the muscle. But if you're just building the muscle for the sake of having the muscle there, what's the point in overdoing it? I don't know if you would consider this guy overdoing it, but that's a whole other subject. But I think the reason I'm pointing out that he's a bodybuilder is because I want you guys to pay attention to know that not every vegan is scrawny and unable to have muscle, because you can definitely build muscle with plants only. That's my reason to point that out.
A holocaust on a daily basis with their easily replaceable food choices, especially as somebody who is as financially stable as Sam Harris, where, he has access to all of these different plant-based options.
Exactly. Somebody like Sam Harris, who has enough money, who can buy anything he wants. It's not like he doesn't have access to these things, and then that's an excuse for somebody who, let's say, lives way up north and they don't have grocery stores nearby, and all they have is the ability to go fishing, and that's their survival. That's not the case with Sam Harris. Sam gets another X for that. Let's give Lifting Vegan Logic a check mark because I like that he pointed that out.
Sam also mentioned how he wants to help solve these problems more directly rather than just talking about them. Sam has admitted in the past that he believes supporting animal agriculture is unethical, yet still participates in consuming animal products.
Okay, he thinks it's unethical. So do I give him a check mark for thinking that it's unethical? I mean, in a way, it's good that he at least realizes it, right? It's not like some people who think, oh, it's not a big... Okay, I'm going to give him one check mark for Sam because he realizes that it's unethical. Not like some people here, some YouTubers who think it's not a big deal and they laugh at animal suffering. I don't think that Sam Harris is laughing at it. I think sounds like he just has a lack of self-control. Let's see what he says.
I actually can't ethically defend eating meat.
I can't ethically defend eating meat. That's what Sam Harris says. And yet, he eats meat. How does that make any sense? It's like saying, I'm against abusing my wife, but I still do it. I'm against child abuse, but, hey, I still do it. I'm against racism, but, still kind of a bit racist. Doesn't make sense, Sam. That just makes no sense.
I do eat meat. I was a vegetarian for 6 years and began to feel that I wasn't getting enough protein.
What? He was vegetarian for 6 years and he wasn't getting enough protein? What a lot of bullshit, Sam. No, X. You're just too lazy, too selfish. Anybody can get enough protein. You just got to work a little bit. You just got to use a tiny couple of brain cells in there to figure out what to eat. That's crap. So disappointing. Let's see what Lifting Vegan Logic says.
So here's a clear example of Sam Harris just talking about an issue while actively participating in the issue and supporting the issue. And this clearly goes against his recent, conviction of like, I want to start facing these serious problems head on rather than just talk about them. Switching your groceries from animal foods to plant foods is one of the ways in which a person can, at least at the individual level, directly face up to the lives lost and suffering derived from animal agriculture. And Sam, as an individual going vegan, with the huge following he has, could potentially convince many others to go vegan, which would in turn significantly help reduce the demand for animal products, hence supply, and supply in this case is bred into existence animals who are killed. All right.
Yeah, I would actually, my iPad's going off here. I would actually say it's not potential. I think it's pretty obvious that if a big YouTuber or a big star or somebody who has a lot of clout, somebody who people respect a lot, a thinker, somebody who gives speeches and so on, if that person who has a lot of, a big following decides to become vegan, it has a huge effect. A huge effect. So it's not just that he is being selfish and just eating meat himself. He is actively encouraging his audience to do so by saying, well, hey, I still eat it. So disappointing, Sam. Check mark for Lifting Vegan Logic for pointing that out.
Let's now move on to a different point in the podcast. So way later in the podcast, the topic of going vegetarian and vegan comes up, and how there are ways to go about helping animals outside of being vegan, like donating to specific animal welfare charities or companies who aim to synthesize lab-grown meat, and Sam ended up bringing up Memphis Meats.
Yeah, and there are also ways in which the business community and innovation in general can come to the rescue here. So, for instance, there's a company, I believe the name is going to be changed, but it was called Memphis Meats, that is spearheading this revolution in what's called cultured meat or clean meat, where they take a single cell from an animal and amplify it so no animals are killed in the process of making these steaks or these meatballs or these chicken cutlets, and they're trying to bring this to scale. And I had the CEO, Uma Valetti, on my podcast a couple of years ago, and actually invested in the company along with many other people, and hopefully this will bear fruit. That's an example of something where, though it was unthinkable some years ago, we might suddenly find ourselves living in a world where you can buy steak and hamburger meat and pork and chicken without harming any animals.
Now, I can agree that lab-grown meat taking over the meat industry would be an amazing thing, and obviously much less suffering and death would occur as a result. I also think it is a great thing that Sam ended up donating to Memphis Meats. But I don't really understand how Sam Harris's investment and donation to Memphis Meats justifies him right now financially supporting a Holocaust, causing demand, which causes supply, which causes more suffering and death. To be frank, there is not this false dichotomy of I have to either go vegan or support lab-grown meat. You can certainly do both, and investing in lab-grown meat, as virtuous as it is, shouldn't excuse Sam for supporting an animal holocaust. I really do think that Sam has a strong emotional attachment to meat and is just one of those people who are waiting for lab-grown meat to take over. And assuming this is true and he is this kind of person, I mean, what kind of person is that when you really think about it? It's a person who feels it is too inconvenient to stop supporting an animal holocaust and is waiting until it becomes less inconvenient to officially stop supporting an animal holocaust.
Despicable, actually. Very disappointing. Sam Harris should know better, and he has every ability to become vegan, but he doesn't do it. And if this guy can do it, so can Sam. And if this guy can become vegan, so can you. So think about that. What stops you from becoming vegan? If it's just your taste buds, is that okay? Is that a reason to harm another sentient being who wanted to live?
It makes you think about like where Sam Harris's morals really lie. I mean, think about how many vegans wouldn't be vegan if we took away all of the meat, dairy, and egg replacements. Of course, these things make it more convenient, But I know me personally, like I would still be a vegan if I had to eat things like, rice and beans and all these kinds of things and had no access to plant-based meats and milks and ice creams and donuts and all these kinds of things. So what kind of person is it to like, say, yeah, this thing is kind of wrong, whatever, but yeah, whatever. I'm just gonna wait until lab-grown meat becomes, full scale.
So I really like what that guy said just now, lifting vegan logic. He said that even if there were no other things like meat replacers and plant-based milks, he would still be vegan because he would choose from among all the other foods there are in a grocery store, like beans and lentils and chickpeas and pasta and every single fruit, every single vegetable, every single nut. There's so much to eat, and there's so many ways to get protein and carbs. So there's no excuse for it. And he's saying that. And the truth is, I don't actually eat very much fake meat either, or fake cheese. Very rarely. Mostly I eat whole foods, and I just cook them very simply with a lot of different Indian spices and so on, but it's totally possible. Ooh, let's see what he's gonna... This is Alex O'Connor. Do you guys know who he is? He's a British guy who goes to... Oh, maybe Sam will tell you. Hold on.
This kind of topic reminds me of a recent video Cosmic Skeptic dropped about people who are waiting for lab-grown meat to come out in order to be vegan. Here's that video.
A lot of people actually say this. They say, look, I kind of get the argument. I'm on board, but I can't quite go vegan until they make it taste right. Once lab-grown meat is a thing, yeah, then maybe I'll go vegan. It's like, right, well, then you obviously haven't been listening to a word that I've been saying. I pity the people who will have to speak to their grandchildren and say to their grandchildren, listen, I knew, when their grandchildren ask, why did you still eat meat? And they say, look, I knew that animals were being forced into gas chambers and separated from their children, and they were being macerated and thrown in bags to suffocate. I know that animals were having elastic bands tied around their testicles until they decay and fall off.
I don't know how many of you have heard of all this stuff, but what Alex is saying right now is absolutely true. The animal abuse that goes on is terrible, and he's listing all of the different things.
If they don't fall off, they're scraped off as a means of castration. I know that when piglets were born, their teeth were yanked out and their tails were snipped off to prevent them cannibalizing each other when they go insane because of the conditions they're kept in. And they're
with no anesthetic. Imagine taking a baby pig, cutting off his or her tail, and ripping out the teeth here. Do you know how much that must hurt? Such innocent little animals that we do that to them. It's horrible. Just so that people can eat bacon and ham. That's why we must stop.
Intelligent beings. I knew that this was happening, but man, the vegan alternatives, they just didn't taste quite right. 80% there, 90% there, but they didn't bleed in the same way. They didn't have the same aftertaste. It's like, imagine trying to explain that to your kids. It's the conversation that we're going to have very quickly. If you're a kind of person who thinks, if you're the kind of person I'm talking about who thinks along those lines, like, yeah, I can kind of get on board with the argument, but not until the taste is truly matched. It's not how it works. Even if all vegan food tasted absolutely disgusting and horrible, without exception, we'd still have a moral obligation to go vegan, even if it tasted disgusting, because taste pleasure is not a consideration when talking about justifying torturing an animal.
So yeah, guys,
Exactly. And that's why I think it's great that because I was enlightened and learned about veganism, when my granddaughter grows up and she asks about me, I'll be able to say, I tried really hard to change the world for you, sweetie. And I'll be proud to be a grandmother who's vegan. And if there's any other grandmothers out there and you want to be vegan, come and hang out here. If anybody's watching and you think your moms or your dads would be interested, tell them to follow this channel. We can all learn together. We can all watch these kinds of videos together and analyze them.
If I had to guess, I would say that Sam Harris is one of those I'm going to wait until lab-grown meat is widely available to go vegan kind of people. It's an honest shame that somebody so concerned with altruism and increasing well-being in the universe, and somebody of Sam Harris's financial status can't just make the ethical connection and switch over his lifestyle right now without lab-grown meat brought to scale. It really does say something about Sam, in my view. So I would go further within the podcast and address some other points, but it does get a little bit repetitive It's really just, hard to hear someone like Sam Harris have a whole podcast dedicated to being good and doing good while being a person who, supports some of the worst misery and suffering on this planet on a daily basis while having, alternatives present. If you want to listen to the whole thing, I will link it below, and it's also found on his Spotify. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Like, comment, and subscribe. If you support my work and want to help me continue doing.
Very good. So what did you guys think? What does your checklist look like? I have a whole bunch of X's for Sam. And so every X and check crosses each other out. So he has 3 X's. And Lifting Vegan Logic has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 check marks. I don't know what you guys thought, but I thought it was a very good talk. I think I would love to be in touch with Lifting Vegan Logic. And I hope you guys learned something. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. And remember, let me see, where's my posters? Why should we love one but eat the other? It doesn't make sense, right? We have to love everybody, all sentient beings. A dog is not more important than a pig. Okay, we have to be nice to animals. Don't eat them. Don't wear them. Don't go to the circus. Don't go to the zoo. Don't need to see animals that way. Don't go to any aquariums either. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye for now.